I wanted it to. But so for the people that weren't at the panel last night, one of the questions that was asked was, I don't know what the question was, but it was about older dancers. That was the question. And I, as the oldest dancer on the panel, sort of pushed my way into the center of the discussion and said, I think it's fine if an older dancer wants to dance, but I think it's also fine for an older dancer not to want to dance. Like, I'm an older dancer. I've had a career of dancing. I've danced on stage enough. I still like teaching. I still enjoy dancing, but I don't want to get into costume. I don't want to spend 2 hours getting into makeup and costume. I don't want to wait an hour to go on stage so that I can perform for 3 minutes and then spend 3 more hours getting back to the room. I just don't want to do it anymore. It used to feel like a ritual, so it all made sense that it took that long to get adorned, to get on stage, to do the spell, and then to, close the aura. But now it just feels painful. The costume is too heavy, everything squeezes too tight, So what I was proposing last night was that there should be a place for elders in the dance, to retire to the chorus. And that should be done so with ceremony, And I think there's a misconception in our hierarchical, patriarchal brains that the chorus is not as important as the featured dancer, when in fact, the whole thing, it's one organism. The featured dancers and the chorus are constantly interchanging, right? We don't have a star who's always out in front. We have a constantly evolving groupings of people that come out of the chorus. So the chorus is as important as the featured dancers, and the featured dancers are as important as the chorus because they work together. So why can't we create a culture where an elder dancer, such as myself, gains enough status to be chorus only? Because chorus is awesome. You don't have to think at all. I mean, you literally are in retirement when you're in the chorus. You just have to pay attention, to what's going on, but you don't have to make any decisions unless you're the chorus leader. So maybe the high priestess gets to be the chorus leader, or maybe the elders take turns being the, who's going to be the eldest leader for this season or something like that, or the chorus leader. But I think instead of thinking you're being banished to chorus only, you should be joyfully going back to chorus only. And even if you're a younger dancer and you decide that you'd like to have a retreat in the chorus, like I would love to be on stage with all my sisters and dance, but I just don't feel up to leading and following and the complete, attention that it takes to do that. You should be able to take retreat in the chorus. So that's my take on it. So. Thank you. Probably a good time to turn off the devices. Oh dear. Device sounds off.
One of the other things, Caroline, about that ageism they talked about was that older dancers tend to get ignored.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that's ever happened to you.
Oh, you just. I think it depends on who's looking at the dancers, because I would say, well, I can't say because I'm a female, but I would say, 100% of the time, if it's a man looking at the dancers, the younger dancers are going to get the attention. And as an older dancer, who cares? Like, do you know what I mean? Take the heat off of me. Like, because you know what it's like when you're in costume and someone touches your coin bra? You're like, excuse me, I'm not on display, but they'll just grab your boob, because they want to, and I understand it, we look like an object, but in fact, we're not, So I don't care if I don't get attention anymore because I've had enough, but I'm a professional. Like, I've been doing it for a long time. And I can totally understand if that's not, if you're not tired of being on display, that you would want to be noticed and recognized, and there's nothing wrong with that either. So, Deanna, hi. Would you be so kind as to hand a card out to everybody?
I would love to.
So it just dawned on me. Are we started? Yes. Okay. So it dawned on me that, well, first things first. Hi, I'm Carolina. How is everybody out there? Thank you for showing up, coming. Deanna, my lovely assistant, who is a fabulous performer and teacher in her own right, is handing out a menu so that you may join, so that you may put your drink orders in now. So when I thought about doing this, and when Elizabeth asked me to do the lecture, I thought, sure, except I don't have a slideshow pulled together. And then Lisa Branner, who is here, yay, raise your hand. She said, or I don't know if you said, or she said, or I said, can I use the costuming slideshow that she put together? And she said, yes, you can. And I said, that's fabulous. Now I have a slideshow. So right now, it's titled American Tribal Style Costuming, and it's a grouping of photos that Lisa put together. And likely the tribal style costuming lecture and this lecture are one and the same because it's all the same stuff, right? The costume and the dance kind of go together. But so I was thinking, how would I discuss the history of American tribal style belly dance? And I thought, I can tell you the story of Carolina, because I'm pretty much American tribal style belly dance, right? But then when I saw these cards sitting on my table today, I thought, oh, here it is, right here. So I'm going to see if I can, this is the challenge. Can I match the card to the screen? Because I only thought about it this morning, so I haven't tried it yet. So we'll see. So I'm going to read you a story and show you some pictures and tell you some history, and then I'm going to answer questions. Sound good? All right. All right. So, do you want to read? No, I got the microphone. I'll do it. Right. Ask our tech guy to do double duty. Okay. So let's say, so go ahead and flick the screen, because that's my teacher, Masha, who is, as you can see, quite unabashed about displaying herself. Blew my mind right out of the water the first time that I saw her. That's not the first time that I saw her. She didn't quite have that. She probably had that outfit on, but she wasn't quite in that posture. Let's just put it that way. So in 1974, Carolina began belly dancing with Masha Archer and the San Francisco Classic Dance Company. Masha's style was an eclectic blend of classic Egyptian, folkloric, and any other influence that she found enticing. Masha, a trained painter and sculptor, taught her dancers to create art through dance. In 1987, after the San Francisco Classic Dance Troupe disbanded, Carolina began teaching in a small studio in the Noe Valley Ministry. Her only goal was to teach people to dance so she could have dance partners. So this is Masha, my dance teacher. And what's really critical in this paragraph is Masha, a trained sculptor and painter, taught her dancers to create art through dance. So she did not actually teach us belly dance. She taught us art. And belly dance was a vehicle to that art. But she's just one of those, she has a magical ability to turn water into wine, you know? I mean, she can just turn anything gold. She's trained. Her whole family, she comes from a legacy of Ukrainian artists, and she is fully trained in everything that she does, and she actually can make art out of anything. So for a while, she made art out of us. And I'm not sure, I know that that Masha was influenced by Jamila, and I think the nice, tidy history that everybody would like it to be is that Masha was a student of Jamila's and Carolina was a student of Masha's, and that's what the legacy is. And in fact, in a way, I think what you should be injected into that is Jamila was a strong-willed woman, Masha was a strong-willed woman, and Carolina was a strong-willed woman. Those are the things that didn't quite bind that history together. So I think Masha probably took a class or two from Jamila, but I think that she was very drawn to the power of what Jamila was doing with the dance, especially the ball and knot presentation. So Masha, being an artist, felt it was her prerogative, no, her I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but she took what she saw, she took what she wanted from what Jamila was doing, and she created her presentation, which involved a chorus of dancers and individual dancers coming out to perform, and these beautiful folkloric costumings. Let's move a screen and see what else we got. So there's a beautiful photograph. So Masha's husband, Charles, was a photographer. So these are Charles's photographs. So he was also a trained artist and a master at creating drama with anything. Okay, another screen. What do we have? Oh, there we go. So there's Masha, and I'm not sure who that other dancer is. Where was I? So Masha took elements of what Jamila was doing, and then I took elements of what Masha was doing. And that's how that legacy goes. The thing about dancing with Masha, I worked with her for about 7 years, from the very first class that I took until the very last whatever we did together. There was no structure at all. The only structure was do what I'm doing and follow my directions. That's it. So when you went into dance class, she would be dancing and she would greet you and say, just follow me. And if you said, what are you doing? She would say, just follow me. Just do what I'm doing. And if you said, why doesn't my taksim look like your taksim? She would say, you have to practice. Right? There was no information. There was nothing about anatomy. There was nothing about angles. There was no structure. It was just like basically try to look like me was the thing. And then on stage, the chorus, we didn't know who was dancing to what, and we probably didn't even know what song she was going to play. But this was back in the day of, at class, we actually had a record player, a portable record player. And when we danced at festivals, we had a reel-to-reel for the edited songs. So that's how old I am. So on stage, we would stand in the chorus, and at the beginning of each song, she would nod at you if you were going on. You and you. And then you did it. So you didn't know until the moment that it happened that you were going out there, which was a good reason to be ready for anything, and I don't know why. I guess I was so young. I was 14 when I first started taking classes from Masha, so I really didn't know how ultimately terrifying that should be. Do you know what I mean? Because I hadn't had any experience with performing before that. Anyway, so let's have another slide and see what we get. So more beautiful dancers. So as you can see, the posture was not as anatomically balanced as it is now. Let's just put it that way. But you can see the costuming is beautiful. Another screen. That's a great picture. So that's Masha on the right side with the pot on her head, and that's Linda giving a nice zagarit. And I don't know if it was by choice or by chance, but most of Masha's dancers were very tall because Masha was tall, and she thought tall was really great. And so I didn't quite fit in, but another screen. See how tall they are? It's not fair. But you can see how beautiful the costuming was. Let's see what else we have here. What else was I going to say about being tall? Oh, so being the youngest and the smallest, shortest in the dance troupe, aesthetically, I was placed in the front of a formation, except that when you're dancing, you defer to the eldest dancer or the most experienced dancer. So that I was the youngest one and the newest one, I would have to defer to the person standing behind me. How would I know when they changed a move? I didn't know until I turned around and figured it out. Like, I don't know what the process was there. It didn't make any sense at all. So clearly, when I took over and started teaching, I was damn sure people were going to know what was going on, which is why I have such a defined and understandable concept of there's a lead dancer, there are follow dancers. When you're facing this way, you're following this person. When you're turning, you just turn. When you make eye contact, the lead is neutral, but I want everyone to know what's going on at all times. And yeah, in Masha's troupe, you just didn't know. You just had to look good while you were making a lot of mistakes on stage. So, next frame, more Masha. Next frame, Rebecca and Masha or Linda. Tall, again, all the tall dancers. Let's have another one. There I am. That's me, out in front. So we danced at street fairs. Masha was very adamant that we not dance in restaurants. We could dance at galleries and at fairs and at parties, but not anywhere where we were competing with food. She did not want the viewer to have to choose between watching the dancer and eating a bite of food. And because I am a strong-willed woman, at some point I got offered a gig dancing at a restaurant or a cafe, and I just didn't even consider that it was a big deal, because when you're a teenager, what's the big deal, right? And so I started dancing at this cafe, and it was, in fact, not fun at all. But Masha found out about it, and she told me that I could either choose to dance at the cafe or leave the troupe. So being the strong-willed woman that I was, I chose to leave the troupe, which caused a schism. And eventually I stopped dancing at the cafe, and she asked me if I would come back to the troupe. So a little drama, interior drama. So next slide. There I am. See how short I am? How tall they are? Yeah. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Being young and tattooed, Carolina attracted other young people living alternative lifestyles. The modern primitives movement was also underway. Tattoos and primitive styles of body adornment were the vogue. Carolina and her students performed at tattoo shows and conventions and became well known around the city by the bay. So let's see if we can advance to something a little more current. Still Masha's troupe. Still Masha's troupe. Very beautiful photograph of Masha with a pot on her head and a snake. And I made that choli that she was wearing, by the way. Beautiful Bakelite jewelry collection. Beautiful smile. Absolutely stunning pose with the statues at the festival. No, what's it called? Palace of Fine Arts in the Bay Area. Oh my God, those statues are so beautiful. And Masha thought she was beautiful, so she posed herself with the statues. Okay, keep going. There I am. Okay, so there's me. First I was born, and then I became a dancer. So yeah, this was right about the time that I started teaching classes and we started performing. And you know, it wasn't American tribal style in the beginning. It was just a belly dance class in the beginning. So on the left, you can see Happy Carolina at the beach in a red bathing suit. I think that picture is so adorable. It's just cute. And then on the right side, you can see Carolina as a grown-up, as an almost grown-up. Thought she was a grown-up at the time. Exactly, right? Okay, another one. Oh, there we go. So that's a classic photo, and that's when we became ATS. So in the beginning, we sort of stumbled around just dancing and improvising, and the first performances were really bad, like really bad. And can't remember exactly when it gelled in my head, but so I was teaching, you know, I rented a studio and I was teaching classes and people would come And I would try the technique of follow me, and they would say, what are you doing? And I would say, just follow me. And they'd say, but what are you doing? And I thought, oh, I don't think I have the charisma to pull this off. So I would start explaining what I was doing. And I was really learning about the body and the dance and the anatomy as I was teaching it, because I could do it. I just never had thought about what part of you is doing it, So we had cholis, we had pantaloons, we had skirts, we had shawls. There was no particular arrangement of how it should look. We sort of had headdresses. We experimented with all sorts of adornment. And like I said, it's a really good thing that there's no living recordings of some of the first performances, because they were really horrible. just a ragtag thing. But people loved it because we were tattooed, and because the modern primitives era was happening, and people they were just hungry to discover this sort of primitive, primal expression. And the dance was that much more exotic, So but this photograph was taken when things really started to gel. And I really like that photo. And I really like that photo because I look like my mom in that photo. And my mom was like the least adorned person on the planet. You know what I mean? She just was short, dark hair, maybe a little bit of lipstick, glasses. She was a librarian, flat shoes, the whole thing. But she just had the most brilliant smile. And I feel like that's my mom's smile. So that's why I like that photo. Yay. Next one. So that's from when we performed at the Ethnic Dance Festival. And that was some tricky work, because I do have video footage of the audition of the first Ethnic Dance Festival. And no, I will never, ever let you see it, ever. I will never release it to anybody on the planet. It is horrible. The passion was there, but the technique and the stagecraft was just terrible. So, but we auditioned and they turned us down, and that was an experience to learn about auditioning and like what is an audition. And what it took like years for me to understand was an audition is an entity choosing who they want for their show. They are not judging whether you're good or bad. And it was really, like I said, I didn't come from a performing arts background, so it was really difficult for me not to feel like I was getting judged, probably because I knew that I had a lot of work to do, along this dance path. And the first time we got turned down, I think the second time we did get in by doing a completely far-fetched North African suite. Because the Ethnic Dance Festival they didn't want to just see improv on stage. They need you to tell a story, and so they can really construct it. It's like for a formal theater show that happens every year in San Francisco. So whether you're good or not is not the point. Can you do a good stage show is the point. So we sort of put together this North African suite that was completely right out of my head, it was not authentic, but they liked it, so they put it in, and I was like, oh, I see how this works. It doesn't have to be authentic, it has to be good on stage and have enough authenticity to it. So I think that's where this one came from, or it might have been from some of the subsequent years. But we we auditioned every year, and sometimes we got in and sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we auditioned and didn't get in, then we would audition the same thing the next year and we did get in. So it had nothing to do with being good. It just had to do with understanding that they're just curating their show. But I like that photo. And another one, please. There's Karen and Rena. Witness the cultivation of small people in my troupe. When we, Karen and Rena and I went to the Salt Lake City belly dance festival that used to be held, or it is it still being held? Do you know? No, the outdoor one, Park City. Anyway, there was a belly dance festival in Salt Lake City, and we got invited to come out, so we decided to go. And Karen and Rena and I performed on stage, and then we were standing at our booth after, the next day, and someone walked by and looked at me and looked at them and said, oh, you performed on stage last night. And we said, yes, we did. And he looked at me in the eye and said, you're the tall one. And I said, yes, I am the tall one. Yes, I am. anyway, so next slide, please. There we go. So I think, yeah, that's from the Ethnic Dance Festival. I was thinking of something else. So Carolina, in the middle is Rena. On the, what side is that to you guys? Your left is Karen. Behind her is Suzanne Dante, and behind me is Kathy Stallman. So Kathy is the only one who's still involved in belly dance at this point. But yeah, pretty cool, huh? Like, I really feel like the headdress is what it's all about. You know, the rest of the costume is okay, but the headdress is like, wow. Like, you just don't see that walking down the street, you know? Okay, next one. There I am. So let's see where we are now. When the need for a name for the dance troupe arose, a friend suggested the playful rhyme Fat Chance Belly Dance, based on the silly question dancers often get from onlookers who think that beautiful, feminine belly dance is merely an exotic entertainment for their personal pleasure. In other words, the answer is fat chance you can have a private show. So it's true. My friend Jim Murdoch is a musical clown, and he's a musician and a performer. And one of the things that he does is a clown, sort of a European clown act. And we were talking one day about the fact that we were getting, invitations to perform, and people didn't know. I didn't provide a name, so I thought I need to come up with a name. And I said something about this when I was sort of naive. People would say, "What do you do?" And I would say, "I'm a belly dancer." And of course the response was, "Ooh, can I have a private show?" And my response would be Fat Chance. And he just said, "Fat Chance Belly Dance." And I said, "That's it." And he said, "I'm joking." And I said, "I'm not." I love it. So I took the name back to the dance troupe, and they were like, "You're kidding." And I was like, "Trust me on this." So it is. But you all know the name, right? Remembered it, right? Yep. That's what I'm talking about. Where did my sense of business come from? Nobody knows. Next slide, please. There I am again. So there was a photographer named Jay Richardson who took this photo and some of the other photos, and he would photograph us in motion. So like I was dancing when he took that photo. Isn't that beautiful? Like he really knew how to capture, like it's just so hard to do static dance photos. When you do your press photos, it's not really you until you're moving. And he was really good at catching the movement. Next one, please. There I am. So that was at the Ethnic Dance Festival, one of the ethnic dance festivals. So that's a professional shot. So let's see what else we have here. As Carolina and Fat Chance Belly Dance expanded horizons, they received a mixed response. Some people loved the new style and others abhorred its departure from tradition. Finally, the style was named American Tribal Style Belly Dance, a name that distanced ATS from the classical belly styles. The word American made it clear that ATS was distinctly an American invention, not a traditional dance style. Tribal style described the dancers working together as a group with a tribal look. Oh, that's the end of that paragraph. So I didn't realize that the style we were doing was different than other belly dance because I just did what I knew how to do. And when we started going to belly dance festivals, which I knew nothing about, people said, "What are you doing?" And I said, I'm dancing. And they said, "No, you're not." Like, "What are you doing?" And there was a lot of controversy because we became very popular very quickly within the dance community and in the city of San Francisco. And a lot of the classical dancers were really not on board with our popularity. And I know now why, because we were making a lot of money in belly dance dollars, which is not a lot of money, but we were getting a lot of popularity, and the general public was thinking that we were authentic, and the cabaret dancers in the sparkly costumes were not. And I really thought they were authentic, and so were we. I thought we were like the old version, and they were the new version. That's what I thought. So it wasn't until I really started to, pay attention and listen and research and talk to people that I realized, oh, in fact, they're the traditional version and we are the new version. But because we had that earthy look, the average person just thought that we were the traditional and they were the imposters. So I can imagine why they were pretty ticked off when I showed up with that. But eventually, it was deemed American tribal style by Morocco, who is the dancer in New York, who's the historian. She decided that's what we would be called. And I said, thank you. Now can we dance? Can we just move on? So we've got a name. Another slide, please. Oh, that's the photo that I was thinking of. That we tried to do a photo shoot. This was way back in the day. This is like maybe 1990. We tried to do a photo shoot at our studio with a photographer, and like every photo just looked awkward. And at the end of the photo shoot, we had just, gathered together and he snapped a picture, and that ended up being the best press shot because it's animated, There's a lot of movement in all the faces. So that's a good one. And that's Carolina. That's Suzanne Elliott. Down below is Rena. Above her is Beth Frew, Jill Parker, and Teresa. I think her name is Thorne now. Yeah, cool. Next slide. Ooh, cheeky. I think that's backstage at,
I remember.
is that Blue Diamonds?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see your blue scarf.
Right. So we shared the stage with Devyani at the
Travel Fest Northwest in
Portland, Oregon. Yeah. And Wendy, who is there on your right, had found a piece of music by Tina Arwen, the Arawan piece. And she said that she heard 5 sections to it. And I said, well, these 5 diamond Tuareg pieces, like I was the first dancer. Hello? Are you paying attention? I was the first dancer to wear that piece. So Mustafa downstairs, yeah, he owes it all to me. I'm not joking. I'm totally serious. I found that piece. I still have that very piece. I found it at a tribal art show in Berkeley, California at Dick and Beanie Wesselman's garage. And I bought it because I thought it was amazing. And I've worn it for every show that I've ever done. And my dancers, originally I would buy them, the pieces. And then it just became like, because we were all wearing it, everybody wanted to wear it. And so now you know the real history of that. But so I said, well, if you hear 5 sections in the song and there are 5 diamonds in our Tuareg piece and it's a Tuareg song, I think we have something magical happening here. And because the Tuareg people are the blue people, I think we should all wear blue ribbons to make us into a cohesive unit. And we did. So that's the story of that picture right there. Next slide. Ooh, Mega, cheeky. That's a great picture of Mega Gavin. Great headdress. Next slide. Carolina. This is anorexic Carolina feeling that she looks fat in that photo. So I just want to throw a little painful truth into it. That was a difficult period of life. Okay, let's read from the card, shall we? Okay. Back at the studio, a system was evolving. Because of the casual nature of FCBD's performance opportunities, the dance was largely improvisational. There simply wasn't a way or a need to choreograph because the dance space often changed at the last minute, and the dancers had to perform without rehearsal or any information about the performance space. So there you go. Next slide, please. Cute. Duets, trios, and quartets worked in set formations. If the stage was two-sided or if the dance space was in the round, dancers could flip the lead by facing the opposite direction. In other words, as long as the dancers stayed in formation, the group could face any direction and the lead could change depending on the audience's location. Carolina developed cues for each step or combination, usually an arm or a head movement that could easily be seen. She found that because all steps began with a gesture on the right, dancers tended to angle to the left. This angle allowed following dancers to clearly see the lead dancer. So that right there, that's my legacy, that paragraph. I'm quite proud of myself. Next slide. There we are again. Next slide. Next slide. Oop, is that the last slide? Because it ties back. How many more are there? Oop, there we go. That is the last slide because it ties back. Lisa, is that the last slide? Okay, cool. Okay, yes, so it ties back into the beginning. Okay, almost done. So let's talk about my brilliant concept. I'm being facetious. So when I started teaching the dance, and I would have dancers, quote unquote, dance together, I never, like, the angling thing happened naturally because what I found, I started to really watch what was working and what wasn't working. I mean, this was when my brain like clicked in, like, oh God, there's like a real system happening here that I didn't create. You know, I mean, I was telling Deanna this morning, I literally feel like I was just walking down the street, just walking down the street. And the goddess like stopped me and said, I need you to do something. And I was like, sure. What do you need? And she said, I need you to take my teaching through dance into the world. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. I'm just me. She's like, I know. And you are going to do it. And I'm like, oh God, here goes the next 30 years of my life. So I really feel like all I did was watch what was happening. It's not like I didn't overthink anything. I just watched it. And what I noticed was if 2 or 3 dancers were dancing together, not looking in the mirror, right? Because that's critical. That the dancer on the left would start to angle so the dancers on the right could see more clearly what they were doing. And sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't. And I noticed that when dancers were dancing sort of flat to the plane of the room, they were less successful, and when they were angled, they were more successful. So I started to really enforce this angle. And I think the angle is really, it's both aesthetically more beautiful than looking at a dancer straight on, but it also provides this huge opportunity to see what needs to be seen. And by keeping the cues by shoulder height or higher, if you're just gazing at the person, the back, you're standing behind somebody and you're looking at their head and shoulders, you can see all the movement without you're not looking for the movement, you just see it. So I just think that's brilliant, and I'm satisfied with that. And so the cues had to obviously be visible and fall in that plane, so that we didn't lose anything below the horizon, as it were. Cues and formations are the brilliance of ATS. See, I told you. Often unnoticed because of the elaborate costumes, fancy steps, exciting music, and sheer beauty of women dancing together, formations and cues are the anchor of improvisational choreography. Even occasional formal choreography is created around the logic of the formations and the cues. It's true. So anytime that we have choreographed anything, for instance, for the Ethnic Dance Festival or for some sort of situation where we have to get a lot of content into a short amount of time, the choreography is as if it were improvisational. It's just sort of like improvisation without repetition. I think that's what the choreography tends to be. The core concept remains in place. Leader to the left, followers to the right. Watch for interaction among the dancers who always have their attention trained on the lead dancer, looking for the cue for the next step. When the dancers face each other and make eye contact, the lead is neutral, falling to the dancer who presents the next cue. But don't think too hard. Allow yourself to see the whole picture, women working together in cooperation, a group focused on presenting the dance as one entity. Thank you. So, oh. Oh, really? Oh, let's go. Oh, look, there's more. Yay. Okay. So let's look. So there's Sandy and Wendy. And is that Christine? No. Yes? In the middle? Okay, great. Sure. Right. That's a good question. I don't know. Well, I think that when I started teaching, after Masha's troop disbanded, Masha had her second daughter, Larissa, and sort of decided to end the dance career, start up with another artistic endeavor as Larissa got older. So I, for a while, didn't perform or dance because why would I want to if it wasn't with Masha, And then I danced. Someone asked me to entertain at a party, and I did, and people really liked it. And someone said, "Do you teach?" And I said, "Sure." And that's how it starts, right? And I was probably just wearing a choli and pantaloons and a hip shawl because that's what I had left over from that. And because I was presenting something that was brand new to people, I just brought all my old costuming into the studio, and I would let people wear my costuming during class because I feel like it really informs your body when you're wearing the natural elements of the costume. And I wanted people to have fun, So then when we started performing, all the dancers that were in that original performing group started to inform the costume. And originally it was just pantaloons because we didn't wear skirts in Masha's troupe. Or we might have worn them, but they weren't part of the costume. The core costume with Masha was a choli, pantaloons, and hip shawl, and some sort of head covering, and a lot of jewelry. But I think Paulette from Gypsy Caravan, when she was in Fat Chance Belly Dance, I think she went to the Renaissance Fair and found the big skirts and we were like, ooh, we like big skirts. So we all put on the big skirts, And then, somebody brought in a bindi and we were like, ooh, we all want bindis, So I think it just everyone sort of brought different elements to it. And it was right about the time of that photo of me with the sword on my head in the black with the mirrored choli. That's when we really clicked it together. Like we got it. We nailed the costume down. So it just for the first couple of years, it was just sort of building ideas. And then I think, being that I do have some formal training in garment design, I started to see the structure of how it should look, like what's going to look the best on everybody. And what's going to work the best is a long sleeve choli. In the beginning, it was all long sleeve cholis, a pair of bright colored pantaloons, a black skirt, and some sort of hip shawl or tassel belt, a coin bra, and the headdress. And that's when it sort of solidified. So I think, excuse me, it was just sort of a treasure hunt for a couple of years, and then a peeling back of things that didn't work. And then also, as you can see in the evolution of the costume now, in the beginning, we did not have so much acrobatic movement. Probably the most acrobatic thing that we did was spin, but there wasn't formal floor work. There wasn't, there might have been a little bit of laybacks, but there was nothing really dramatic. We didn't have the A-swat or the T-swat or anything that swung the body around like that. So we could wear big heavy headdresses with things that would swing. And we could wear, a lot of costuming because we weren't going to get tangled up. We weren't doing a Berber walk on the floor, or anything like that. But then as the dance got more complicated, the costume had to get lighter to accommodate that, which I think is sort of a shame. If I could have my way, I would sort of freeze it at 1995 because that's when the movements were the biggest and the simplest and the easiest for everybody to do. And the costume was heavy, because the movements were simple. And I just think the more advanced it gets, the harder it is to keep the costume elaborate. If that makes sense? So let's see what else we got. Kai. That's definitely the modern costume. Next slide. Ooh, that's an interesting photograph. Wendy and Kai. Next slide. Carolina. So I sort of went the way of abandoning the headdress altogether. and just went to a really big bun and a one red flower. Because I'm like, you know what? If we're not going to do it full on, I want to make it really simple. And that was fun for a little while. Next slide. Still thought I was fat. Yep. It's a tragedy. Look at all those cute girls. And next slide. Carolina and Mega in the ultimate pose. Christine posed us for that, for the cover of the volume 7. And I said, this is going to be a disaster because everyone's going to want to know what we're doing with our hands. Because in ATS, the hands are always lifting up and they're always above the head. You know, and this pose, and Christine said, but this pose is so beautiful, it's going to look really great. And then we ended up using it on the cover of the DVD. And how many people have asked me, what are you doing in that movement or in that photograph? And I'll answer it for you. It's the middle of the Sarah turn where the hand is dropping down and about to turn over in a floreo. Oops, sorry. And it's an interesting photo, but it's been very difficult to explain. Next slide. Ooh, there we are. Yeah, the Banjara costuming is just going to live on forever. It's the most beautiful. It's beautiful. And next slide. It's a devotion number 1 or number 2? Devotion number 2. So devotion was a series of performances that we did in San Francisco. And actually at my booth right now, I have bundled together 5 of the devotion DVDs for $10. Please take them and enjoy them because I have so many of them that I would be happy to supply the world with devotion DVDs. So 5 different shows, 5 different performances. Next slide. Ah, yes. Ah, yes. So Meg and I were teaching at a dance studio in Connecticut. And we were using Anathema by Jeremiah Soto. And it was just one of those uncanny moments where like we're watching dancers perform or, drill, and we're listening to the music, and there must have been some kind of heavy bass in the dance studio that we were in. And we looked at each other, and we kind of like nodded at each other when we both went, because it sounds like lowrider music to me. You know what I mean? And so I asked Jeremiah, because at that time, Jeremiah was living in LA in a sort of like a lowrider neighborhood. And I said, does Anathema have anything to do with the cars, the lowriders in LA? And he was like, I didn't consciously do that, but I could see where I might have just, put that in there. So we decided to do the lowrider video. How many people have seen the lowrider video? Oh, you guys, you have got to go to my website, fcbd.com, and click on, is it in the gallery at this point? We rented this car, this lowrider. This is a full-on lowrider from San Francisco. We drove to Treasure Island, and we did a whole video around the concept of Anathema and the lowrider aspect of it. It's so good. And then Kelly Beeston in the UK did a takeoff on it. I'm not sure. Do you know what she called it? But she did it around an old pickup truck that's kind of like there. You know what I mean? So I was just like, wow, I think everyone should do a video of it. It's just go and watch it. It's super entertaining. And it was freezing cold. The sun it was brilliant. We actually drove across the Bay Bridge in that convertible with the top down, and it was not cold. And when we got onto Treasure Island, it was so cold that we were just like little shivering puppies, of just like, this is freezing. But we had to look like, yeah, we're in the sunshine in California. It was just like the wind was like crazy. But anyway, that was good. And if you notice, I didn't bring my rings, I forgot, but I have 2 rings, FCBD rings. And just so you know, how many people have seen Sons of Anarchy? Sons of Anarchy? Really? Really? Anyway, there's a scene in Sons of Anarchy where Jax takes his rings off that say SONS, sons, because that was the name of the motorcycle gang. And he puts them on his dad's headstone. And I was like, I want FCBD rings that look like that. So Sandy, being the ever clever little researcher that she is, figured out that there was a jeweler named Bill Lenz who made the Sun's rings. So I contacted Bill and I said, this is who I am. This is what I do. I've seen your rings on the show. Would you make rings for me? And he was like, of course I would. So I have sterling silver rings made by Bill Lenz, fashioned after the Sons of Anarchy rings. I'm just going to leave that there because apparently to you it doesn't matter. To me, it's almost everything in the world. So next slide, please. There she is, Sandy, who did the research on the Sun's rings. That's a really beautiful photograph by Christine Adams. Next slide, Wendy. Next slide, Carolina. Any other questions while we're looking at slides? How did the moves change from what Masha was doing and how did I sort that out? I think it's purely based on, number one was based on what I remembered that we did. Because remember, she didn't give us any technique. So it was what I remembered, you know? And then it probably had a lot to do with people asking me, how do you do that? Or what is this? And I had to figure out a way to explain it. Whereas before it had just been shown to me and I copied it. Now I was trying to explain it. So I think probably it's how the structure really started to come into it because, you know, there had to be balance, you know, there had to be logic to it. There had to be, you know, safety for the body, you know, that sort of thing. So I think it just was both, you know, the right side of the brain, what I remembered, and the left side of the brain, how can I explain this to somebody else? So it started to make things more square than more abstract. Does that make sense? Yeah. Is there another slide? Interesting. That's okay. Question in the back. Yes. You mean training in anything? That's a good question. Not much. So I'm almost a high school dropout. I did actually graduate in my sophomore year, but I stopped going to school in my, did I say graduate in my junior year? But in my sophomore year, I stopped going to school because I hated it. And I basically just went to belly dance class and roamed around San Francisco and you know, things like that. And my parents said, you have to go back to school. And I said, I can't do it. And so the summer came and somehow, I don't know if it was a counselor or another student or a teacher, but somebody mentioned that there was a program at the Unified School District where I was enrolled called the Wilderness School. And I explored what it was, and it's a 4-phase program. It actually is still happening, I think, I hope. It's a 4-phase program of, it's actually called the Community Environmental Education Project, but the nickname is the Wilderness School, because you go on a wilderness adventure where they break your will, and then you learn to follow directions, or freeze to death, you know, it's kind of that kind of thing. And then there's also a farm phase, and everybody always wanted farm phase because you got to get up early in the morning and be the first one to get to the farm and, you know, let the animals out and feed the animals and do all that kind of stuff. That was really great. There was an urban phase where you got a job and you learned how to act like a grown-up and get a job. And then there was an independent phase where you could do whatever you want. You just had to sort of present something about it. And I really, like, without exaggeration, have to tell you that if I had not found the Wilderness School, I would not be here right now. And I know that seems like far-fetched from the world of entertainment, but literally, it kept me from going completely insane because I just grew up in the middle of nowhere in the dullest community with no access to anything. I mean, talk about, it was like before color TV, you know what I mean? So it was before cordless phones, it was before the internet, it was before, I mean, the best thing in the world was the library, because you could explore ideas at the library, but you had to take the bus. Took 2 hours to get to the library, you know what I mean? So, you know, it was, I don't know, I really feel for people, creative people who didn't have access to things in the past. So, for me, school was like a prison sentence. And I literally felt like I couldn't handle it. And when I found the wilderness school and I got accepted, we got there on the first day. And the wilderness school was held in the portable, so it's not in the main school, thank God. It was outside the school. And on the first day, our teacher said, here's how the phases work. You know, everybody's going to be doing different phases at the same time. There's no written assignments that need to be turned in, but you do have to complete, all of the phases. You know, there was some sort of criteria that we had to do. But he said, there is one rule, and that rule is show up to the Monday morning meeting, and if you don't, you're out of the program. So you decide. And I was like, I decide? I get to act like an adult. Like, they just handed me all the freedom in the world. All you have to do is act like a grown-up. And I was like, I'm in. You know what I mean? And like, it was just the most amazing experience because it let me be a grown-up when I was ready to be a grown-up instead of being trapped in a maze. But after I graduated from high school, certain family difficulties led me to leave home early, and I lived in a school bus, and I worked as a waitress, and I was quite happy. And my mom came to the school bus one day, and she said, when are you going to go back to school? And I said, I'm not. I'm never going to school again. It was prison, and I'm done with it. She said, you have to learn a trade. If you're not going to go on to college, you have to learn a trade. And I said, okay, I want to learn to sew. I mean, I was sewing at the time, but I want to go to school to really learn everything so that I can have a career as a seamstress. And she said, okay. So off we went to try to find that, and I did find that in the Pacific Fashion Institute in San Francisco. And I'm actually repeating that curriculum now at Apparel Arts in Oakland, because when you go to school when you're 20, not a whole lot of it sticks in your brain, right? So I did, in fact, complete that certification course, and then the dance just showed up, and I kind of had to leave the sewing behind. And I knew that I would come back to it, but I needed to go for the dance while I could. So really my only education is an alternative high school and 2 levels of garment design school. And the rest of it is just, street smarts. Figure out how to not get pregnant and not get killed. When you live that kind of a rough and tumble young life. Yeah. Any other slides in there? Oh, yes, the new Fat Chance Belly Dance. Here's Sophia and Yuka. They're so beautiful. And another slide. Kai and Christine doing a power duet. That's really beautiful. Any other slides? Carolina. That was that in Milwaukee? Or maybe, I don't know. But I like that costume. It was kind of bordering fusion-y. So I decided that I probably shouldn't, you know what I mean? Like, I felt like I wanted to be true to ATS, and I felt like I was kind of leaning towards fusion with that one, but I do think it was pretty. Another slide. Ooh, Carolina flips upside down. Another slide. Christine. Another. Oh, yes. So the Bessie skirt. I love the Bessie skirt. So we created a little fun photo shoot with that. And my rings, right? Another slide, or that's it? Nope, there's another one. Anything else? Ooh, that's pretty. Unfortunately, like, that's a really beautiful photo, but it tells you nothing about the skirt. That skirt is the hardest thing to photograph because it's just a pool of black, with no definition to it. But that was created by Kathleen Crowley. Another slide. Oh, my choli dress. Yay. So I created the choli dress for me, the elder dancer who doesn't want to show their belly anymore. Yay. It's an honor to wear the choli dress. Yay. Graduated to the choli dress, right? And that's the Sacred Circles Dance Retreat. That's a really great festival. If you haven't checked it out, it's really wonderful community. I like a lot. Any other? Oh, this is the last one, isn't it? Yes, because that was a good one. So that's the last Tribal Fest, I think. I really like that photo. Okay, and we're done. So, questions? Yes, ma'am. I looked in the phone book. No. No, don't laugh. That's what you did back then. No, I remember, I have no idea why I wanted to belly dance. To this day, clueless, I don't know. I do tell a story about how it's a long, very unhappy story that I won't tell right now about getting stood up for a dance by a boy. And at that, yeah, right? You're like, oh, every girl goes, that feeling of vulnerability. But at that moment, I was like, you know what? I'm done with this whole boy has to ask you to dance thing. Like, I want to be able to dance whenever I feel like dancing. And I don't want to have a partner. I don't want a boy to have to grant me permission to dance. And because that was way before you could just go out and boogie on your own, you know? So I told my mom I wanted to belly dance. I don't know where that came from. And so she asked some of her friends, and one of them said, oh, Masha Archer is definitely the person that your daughter should check out. So my mom gave me the phone number, and I called Masha, and then that was it. So it was just like a word of mouth thing, totally random. But I did call some belly dancers from the phone book, and this is when I'm 14 years old. I was not impressed. And when I talked to Masha, I was impressed. So there you go. That's 14-year-old intuition. What's that? A little goddess interference. Let's grant the goddess that respect. Yes, ma'am. Oh, you thought I grew up in cool boho SF with all the things? No, I didn't. Well, I was conceived in San Francisco, and I was born in San Francisco, but my parents decided that they couldn't live in their cool North Beach apartment after I was born, right? Like, do you hear the violins playing? It's just so sad. So they moved to Daly City, California, which at 1960 was one of the dullest places on the planet, literally because it was still being developed. So there weren't a lot of houses built where I lived, and there weren't a lot of people. And like I said, the library was 2 hours away. Everything was 2 hours away. So, you know, when you're a little kid, it doesn't matter. But when you're a teenager, it matters, you know, being able to go places and see people, because that's when you learn how to be, you know, social. And so it was pretty, and now it's, you know, there's a great bus system, there's the BART train, there's like stores everywhere. You know, it's really different now. But back then, we actually lived on Westline Drive, which was there were a couple of, it was a steep hill going down to the cliffs, then down to the ocean, and we were on Westline Drive. And if anybody knows anything about Daly City and Pacifica, you would know that the Esplanade has been eroding since 1965. And eventually it's going to just be gone because the ocean is eating the cliffs, which is what oceans do, which is why you shouldn't build on cliffs. But apparently back then the guy didn't have the memo, and the developer built right on the cliffs. So if this is my side of the street and this is the other side of the street and the ocean is here, the ocean started to erode the cliffs here. And when I was a little kid, they eminent domained the houses, and they put the houses on flatbed trucks and they drove them away. So when I was like 8 6 or 8 years old, I remember sitting and watching them dismantle basically the houses at the bottom of the cliff and drive them away. And I said to my parents, um, is that going to happen to our house? And they were like, no, everything's fine. And I was like, I don't know about that, you know? And then being that it was an ocean and cliffs, the storms that would come through were really violent just because we were that close to the storm. And my parents' house was like an acoustic nightmare. You know what I mean? So I'm like an only child coming home after school by myself during a storm, and it just sounded like the whole house was going to blow away. You know what I mean? And I would say to my parents, are you sure that this is okay? And they're like, everything's fine. You know what I mean? It wasn't fine. I mean, those cliffs have continued to erode. Like almost all the buildings along it have been eminent domained and demolished because they've just, couldn't withstand the foundations crumbling. So there was just a lot of out there when I grew up. So no, sadly, did not grow up in San Francisco, where I should have clearly been able to run around North Beach. Yes, ma'am.
And you mentioned that at some point you were teaching in a studio in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Where? I'm from Connecticut.
It was not a belly dance studio.
Oh, okay.
It was Mega and I were hired to teach a general skills, and someone had found it was a ballet studio. Yeah, so it was not a. I don't. I mean, my family's from Connecticut, so you think I'd be able to answer that question, but I don't remember. I'm sorry.
How did you meet Mega and start Tribal?
Oh, that's a good question. Mega was a student of mine in San Francisco. She lived in San Francisco, and she said that she was interested in belly dance, and somebody handed her a flyer, or I think she said somebody handed her a flyer, and then she saw more flyers around. It was sort of like this confirmation of she should check out my class. So she started taking classes for me when I taught at the Noe Valley Ministry in San Francisco, and she eventually had to move back to Louisiana, right? And that's where she met you? No, she met you in Alabama.
She moved to Louisiana and was there for a few years, and then moved to Alabama to help take care of her mom, and that's where we met.
Okay, right. So after Mega was in Louisiana, is that when we connected? Or was it when she was in Alabama?
Alabama.
So she spent time in Louisiana, and then she went back to Alabama, and she just stayed in contact. And she was like a really good long distance student. She would call me up. She would, talk to me. She would tell me what was going on. She expressed her enthusiasm. And one time she said to me, I want what you have, but I'm not you. And I was like, that is the most honest thing that anybody's ever said to me. You know what I mean? And I said, well, let's see, if we can get you what you want, And so we just stayed in contact. She came out and danced with the dance troupe a few times. Then I went back and hung out with her troupe and danced a couple of things. And then we just decided to just sort of form a partnership and take it on the road, which is what we did. Yeah. Anybody else? Lisa? Mm. That's a good question. Well, the internet. When I first started teaching, like I'm a Capricorn, like earth, metal, grounded. I just want to do the same thing over and over again, clearly. I just want, I want the one outfit that I can wear forever. I want the one bag. I want the one pair of shoes. I want the one dance form. I want I don't have a desire for constantly reinventing the wheel. So when I started teaching, I assumed that everybody was like me. And in fact, they were not, because I felt like if I had found me, I would just come to class, and that's what I would do. Because that's what I did with Masha. I just went to class until she wanted me to dance in her dance troupe, and then I did. But I didn't try to not do what she told me to do, But when I started teaching, there were definitely a good core community of Bay Area people that came to my classes, but then also people would drop in and then go away, and then little sprouts would pop up. And I was like, how can you only came to 2 classes? How can you be teaching a class in wherever you are? And they just miraculously knew everything, and they were, you know? So obviously the dance form got instantly diluted when people did that, because they only took what they knew in those couple of classes and then ran over here. And then at a certain point we created the videotapes, and that is a really sad story that I won't go into right now. But, so then people wanted to buy the videotapes, which was good because at least got a little bit of format to people. And then, more sprouted up. And at that point I really couldn't say you can't do it, because if I'm selling you a videotape about it, clearly you can do it. So I was hoping that people would, still phone home, but I couldn't really stop them from doing what they were doing. And then when the internet sprouted, it just popped up everywhere. And I don't know what the first international satellite was, but it certainly spread like wildfire. And to this day, it is worldwide, which is just astounding. And sometimes I get, I feel funky, and I feel like my life is all for nothing. I didn't go to school. I didn't learn this. I never got married. I never had kids. I'm like, oh. And then I go, wait a minute. I created a dance form. It's all over the world. And people like me. You know what I mean? Or, it makes people happy. And I mean, there you go. And then I'm like, I'm fine now. So all those other things are not as important as having people say, you make me happy. Yeah. So the international thing is just amazing. And I am so happy to have seen it pop up in some really hardworking countries, where in America, we're kind of hardworking. We do have a work ethic that's admirable, but in terms of excellence, we're not really in pursuit of excellence here. I feel like in other countries that are older than we are, that have more of a history than we do, they take learning much more seriously. And I see dancers coming out of international countries that are like, wow. Wow, talk about nailing the technique and putting together a costume and understanding the formations and how they work and not making convenient changes, So I've been really impressed by a lot of that. I mean, I'm of course impressed by the United States, but I just think Americans are just, we don't want to follow the rules. Other countries want to follow the rules. Like other countries will freeze in place. Like, what do I do right now? And I'm like, well, it's improv. Just do whatever you want. And they're like, no, I can't do that. You have to tell me. I'm like, okay, that's different. Let me work on that. Whereas Americans are like, I don't want to do it that way. I'm going to do it a different way. And I'm like, but it's a format. You can't change it. And they're like, I'm changing it. Goodbye. Go change it. So, yeah. Anybody else? Yes. The headdress? Well, when I was dancing with Masha, there was always some sort of head adornment happening. It was not as big as ours became, but she sort of insisted that she wanted our hair, which was a very recognizable part of our personality, to not be the same as what went to work and to the grocery store. She wanted there to be a regal presentation, So there was not a formula for wearing a head wrap when I was in Masha's troupe, but you had to do something. So it might just be maybe not a head wrap, but maybe your hair, more like a hair garden that we have now. Maybe some jewelry and flowers in your hair or something, but you couldn't just have hair. You had to do something with it. So when I started teaching and presented that concept to the dancers that wanted to perform, again, we just sort of, everyone started to bring different elements together. And literally, I still have my very first black head wrap from back in the day, and it's just a piece of black cotton fabric, that's 2.5 yards long or yard and a half long. I'm not sure how long it actually is. And just like trial and error wrapping it, and obviously finding out what stays on and what doesn't stay on, and finally I came up with a formula, because Capricorns like to do the same thing over and over again while they're standing on a rock with metal shoes on. I got really frustrated with having to create. I mean, you're going to create a different headdress every time you put it together because it's layers of fabric and jewelry. But I couldn't quite handle the maybe it's going to work and maybe it won't when you have a deadline. Like that makes me nuts at any point in time. You know what I mean? Like, I'm completely willing to try. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, if there's not a deadline. But if you hang a deadline out there, and that makes me nervous. So I finally came up with the formula that worked for me. And we put the folkware, did I mention that I have a folkware pattern? I do. I have Bill Lynn's rings and a folkware pattern based on me. Small things, you know what I mean? Small things make me very happy. But the tribal headdress and makeup booklet that I have that was put out by Folklore Patterns shows the system of wrapping that I came up with. And basically what I figured out was it needs to just keep going up, right? Because I wanted this uppage to happen. And generally what happens when people try the headdress for the first time is they tie it low and it looks really like drawn down. So I was like, how can I get people to understand that it needs to like go up, up, up? Because you're trying to draw, like the whole dance is trying to bring the viewer's eye up like that. So it was just sort of a system of like, what are the physics to take this fabric and keep twisting it and knotting it and wrapping it and not too tight and not too loose, and a couple of hat pins to hold it together, and then accent scarves and then some flowers and jewelry. So it was really just an evolution of how do you put this together? Like, how can I physically manifest the look that I'm trying to get, Like, and if you look at like the Muka graphics and the sort of the Baroque, the excellence of all the layers of fabric and all that kind of stuff. Like, if you're looking at that, how could you actually make that real? So it was that sort of taking that visual artistic imagery and how can I make it stay on my head while I'm spinning around in a circle? Does that answer the question? Yeah? No, I think the inspiration was how can I make it stay on? And how can it bring the eye up? Because Masha's teaching, I mean, the very, very critical teaching that I received from Masha artistically was draw the eye up. Don't draw the eye down, but up. And the dancer should be, like, Masha was really against floor work because she didn't want the viewer to look down at the dancer. That's how adamant she was about that. But I just became intoxicated with floor work, and I felt like if the dancer's body was facing up, that was pretty good. You know what I mean? Well, at least the front torso was facing up. That it was powerful and it could withstand being the look down. But other than that, everything that she wanted to be long and to be drawn up. So I took that quite literally, and everything, even when I sort of designed, like solidified the movements and described the movements, I decided to always refer to what part of the body was lifting as opposed to what side was dropping. So like if you're looking at the arm undulation, I would describe the lifting arm versus the dropping arm, if that makes sense. Just sort of to give me a registry to work with. Yeah. How's everybody doing out there? Did the waitress come by for your drink orders? What did we? Yeah? Yeah, that's interesting, and that sort of goes along with the international um, diaspora and the internet. Um, so up until between 1987 and 2000, I was renting studios around San Francisco to have classes in, and which is no small feat. I just got to say, finding a dance studio in San Francisco not easy. And at a certain point, I felt like I had amassed such a beautiful collection of textiles and jewelry that it was a shame to have it just sitting in a box. And I felt like I really wanted my own studio, and I felt like I could make it into sort of like a gallery studio situation. So took a little while, but I found the studio on South Van Ness, and it was like as soon as up until that moment, the dance had been an underground activity, right? And it was like wildly popular. All the classes were at least 30 to 40 people every single time I held a class. As soon as it came above ground into a studio, all the class levels dropped, like almost in half. And I was like, this is not what I expected to have happen. Like, I thought making it easier to get to the same place every time, it's near a BART station, it's consistent, would make it more appealing. And in fact, I think it became less exotic because it was now above stream. And I felt like sort of like part of my passion just sort of died away with that, because it was like, wow, I just made this easier for you to get to, and now because it's not difficult, you don't want to do it. And that was right about the time that Mega and I had started working together, so that was inspiring. And I think it was Ansa from North Carolina that said she wanted to have like a weekend intensive of everything ATS. And I thought, okay, well, I'll just teach you all the steps. And so she came out and I taught her all the steps, and away she went. And then a couple other dancers came to me from somewhere else and said, could you teach us all the steps? And I was like, sure, I could teach you all the steps. So, and then all of a sudden people were saying, I hear there's a course where you teach all the steps. And I said, well, there can be. And people said, we want to sign up. So general skills started out at 5 students a time. 5 students. And I would teach them all the steps. And then more and more people wanted to join. So then it became a radical 25 students at a time. And then it got really huge, and then it turned into like 75 students a time. And now we're back to about 25 students at a time, which is absolutely fine. But yeah, it just rode this wave of popularity. So just like everything else, I followed it, and I'm willing to scale it up or scale it back depending on people's what's the word? Request? No. Popular? No. There's a word. Supply and demand. Thank you. Yeah. And then, Capricorn with the metal shoes on the rock, like general skills and you're good, right? Because you got to go practice now. And people said, well, can you teach us how to teach? And I'm thinking, well, if you know how to dance, why you can just go do it. And they said, no, we want to be able. You want you to teach us how to teach ATS. And I thought, well, okay. So I used to have people teach. I did just a few times. Had people teach me every single step, and then I thought, I'm going to go insane. I can't. I just can't do this. So I had to sort of structure it into how to teach the steps without having you show me every single step, which I knew was a little bit dicey because you may be very good at one step and not very good at another step, but I really just didn't have the time. I mean, it would cost the student so much money to have me actually review every single step that they could teach, that nobody would want to do it. So I thought, how can I stay within the budget of what people are willing to spend and give them, a little bit of structure and integrity. But, basically, if you know how to do this step and I tell you how to teach in general, you should then be able to teach that step. That's the hope, the chain that I'm hoping to put together. But not everybody can be honest about whether they can do the step. and they take teacher training, and I go try to do a good job out there. But then we created advanced teacher training because people really wanted all the information, like everything. So that's a very expensive course, and it's not a pass or fail course. We only accept you if we know that you're going to pass. It just doesn't seem fair to take your money and not let you pass, or take your money and let you pass when you don't really have all the information. So that's a really rigorous course. And you took it.
Very first one?
Deanna took it, very first one. And then when Mega became ill in 2017, I realized that I had to sort of give the advanced teachers super training so that they could work with me. So Deanna and several other of the advanced teacher training graduates have undergone, would you describe it as anything, a specific torture sensation, or?
I think that I love it because it's a very honest feedback and very personalized feedback on how you can be a better instructor and dancer and what things you need to work on. It's just a more personalized.
Yeah, that's good. Honest feedback is a good way of putting it. So I'm pretty tough. Like, if you're going to work with me, you got to get it. And so that's like the top layer is the unknown. Only a few people know that there's one more floor. And to get up there, you got to really prove yourself. And some people make it and some people don't. So it just sort of started as requests, and then got really big, and then it started to get small again, and then it. Carrie, did you have a question?
You talked last night about watching your babies grow up, your daughters grow up.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of growing pains to that as well. And it sounds like that some of this was developed because of that. I mean, sometimes you can be really, really proud, at other times you go, what did they say? Oh, please.
Please. Just please. That's good enough. Yeah.
Those first years, I mean, you must have had mixed feelings. Can you talk about that a little bit?
The first years of.
Of watching your daughters grow up.
Yeah. Well, like the first thing, as I mentioned earlier, was the fact that people would take a couple of classes and then just pop up teaching somewhere else. I was like, how can you don't even know what this is. I'm not even done creating it. How can you be teaching it? And then obviously it turned into lots of different styles of tribal, just because in the beginning I was still creating it. So there was definitely some growing pains there in that I didn't really like what I was seeing. Sometimes I did like what I saw, and sometimes I didn't. And it was really hard to smile and go, how nice. And you're like, oh God, what is that? So it was difficult because there just wasn't enough experience. There wasn't enough time under people's belts. And I also didn't travel. Like in the first 10 years of teaching, I didn't travel because I really couldn't, because I didn't have enough of a teaching base here for me to be able to go somewhere else. And I just knew, like, if I went somewhere else, all the work is going to back up here of running a business, so I just didn't go. And when Megan and I finally hit the road, I trained my teachers who worked in the studio, my advanced teachers in the studio, to teach while I was gone. So that took a little bit of time. But just, I think as Mega and I got out there more to do general skills and teacher training, and then there's like, let's just, if I say it in a ratio, in a room full of 25 people taking general skills and teacher training, 5 of them are really going to get it. So that would be like the percentage that's working. So every time we go out to teach, that percentage gets it. What's that? 20% of the people would get it. The other people didn't totally get it. Which is not to say that they were bad. It's just they didn't get it, the vibe of ATS and how to present it and what to do with it. Or they didn't care to get it, but 5%, 20% did. Every time we went out, 20%, 20%, 20%, which over the years turns into quite a lot of 20% and quite a lot of 100%. So now I feel like there's a lot of really good dancing going on out there. Whereas 15 years ago, it was kind of like, oh, uh-oh. But now I really feel confident. When I go to a show that purports to have ATS, I pretty much feel like I am going to see it. And when I see it, I like it. And sometimes, as I said with some of the international performers, I'm like, wow, amazing. Just like because they've taken it so much to heart. And I've often said, like, ATS should be in the United Nations, right? Because this dance form, American tribal style, is popular all over the world. Hello. Not just tribal style, not just belly dance, but it's called American. And people in every country call it American tribal style proudly. I do ATS. I do American tribal style. And I'm like, come on. You know what I mean? Come on. Can I get some cred here for all of us who like are able to just walk through walls of prejudice and difficult relationships between countries? And do you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's really like I'm really kind of surprised that I haven't gotten the phone call. Well, I guess. Well, what was that? But I'd settle for a seat in the United Nations. And I pretty much, I sat by the phone while Obama was in office because I was pretty sure if anybody was going to call me, it was going to be him. Like right now, I'm not surprised. Let me just put it like that. But, I have high hopes that eventually the phone call is going to come. I also feel like I was waited for the post office to call me for a really long time about how to run a business. And apparently Jeff Bezos was the one that finally taught them how to run a business. But I feel like I've been in the mail order business for so long that I felt like every time I went to the post office, I was like, head desk, head desk, head desk. What is wrong with this organization? They just don't have it together. And then eventually, Amazon handed them enough. What's that? They did. I mean, they needed to, and so thank God, we could actually use the post office again. But those were the two things I'm not expecting the post office to call now because I feel like Jeff Bezos did my work for me. But the United Nations is still, I can contribute. I'm just saying. If anybody has any connections out there, I'm just saying. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
So we got about 20 minutes left. Is it time to talk about what you see the future being?
Oh, sure.
Does anybody else have a?
Dean, you had a question? Who's my favorite? Just kidding.
People that you've taught, and some of your students are the ones where you're like, oh, please do the best that you can, and others are like Deanna, where you're like, she's working with me, and she's like risen to my hidden suite up here. Like what's the piece of advice that I think a lot of us are here because we dance ATS and we're trying to be the best dancers we can, and I would just love to hear like what advice would you give us in that journey?
Well, when we got to the hotel for ATS reunion in Arizona this year, excellent hotel, I have to say. What was it? Hilton Honors in Scottsdale, Arizona. Excellent hotel. The staff there are stupendous and very social and helpful. And so the one of the guys with the wheelie cart was taking me to my room, as I had all the merchandise boxes, so I needed extra assistance. So he said, "So I heard you're the big kahuna for this belly dance event." And I said, "Yeah, I kind of am." And he said, "So can anybody learn to belly dance?" And I said, "Well, it depends." And he was like, "Well, what? Like, could I learn to belly dance?" And I said, "Yes, you can." I said, "If you are able to walk into the room, shut up, listen to the teacher, and do the drills, you can be a belly dancer." He was like, "Got it." But if you walk into a room with monkey mind and you talk while your teacher's teaching and you don't do the drills, you're never going to get it. That's it. So, I mean, I really think it's like, do you want to dance? Do you want a teacher? Do you want to go into a studio and stay there for 1, 2, or 3 hours doing the same thing over and over again? You will succeed, But if you talk constantly, if you talk over your teacher, if you try to organize the things that your teacher's giving you, if you don't drill, if you don't own your body, if you don't take care of yourself, no, you won't. But it's really just that desire. Like, what do I have? For me, it was like, what do I have to do to be able to dance for 3 hours a day? That's what I want, And it was to put on my little metal shoes and stand on the rock, do the same thing over and over and over again. And if you're not willing to do that, I just don't think I think you wouldn't succeed at any art form if you didn't want to do that, and be transported by it. At a certain point, I think in the beginning, it's very left brain. You go in trying to understand it. Or maybe it's in the beginning, it's very right brain because you see it. And you're like, ooh, I want what I see. And then you get there and you realize, whoa, left brain kick in. I have to understand what I saw. And then eventually, right brain kicks in again and you're just in flow, and you're just happily doing it over and over and over again and you're not thinking. So I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but that's what I got. Yeah. Anybody else before we go on to the future? No? No? Okay. Future, what do you guys think the future of ATS is?
Well, ATS is my retirement plan. You touched on it a little bit. So I want to dance well enough. I was glad to hear you say that you started to teach so that you could have someone to dance with,
Mm-hmm.
because I was questioning on whether that was selfish or not, but we can talk more about that. But I want to travel around the world and dance with all these troops and have fun and dance
Yeah,
forever.
that sounds good.
And it's okay if I'm in chorus, but I still just want to be a part of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you get to choose whether you want to be in chorus. It's the retirement plan, right?
Yeah.
Like active retirement or passive retirement, I guess. Excellent. Anybody else have the future of ATS? The future of maybe the future of your own ATS? It's not outside of our grasp. I mean, we pretty much are creating world peace. Mm-hmm. What do you think the future of ATS is?
What I hope the future of ATS is that the people, those 20% that you're like, they get it.
Mm.
I hope that those are the 20% that keep doing it,
Mm-hmm.
because those are the ones, I'm going to cry. I'm not going to cry. Because those are the ones that will continue on with the world peace, right? And not be like, oh, I'm going to forget you. I'm going to go do my own thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
those aren't the people that, I mean, maybe they get it, but they get it in a different way, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like to continue ATS and the future of ATS, those of us that are totally dedicated to being able to travel around the world and dance with anybody and have that energy together and celebration together, like, I hope that those are the people that continue it so that it doesn't get watered down.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna cry. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is the future. I think the future of ATS is that 20% that's turned into 100%, 200%, 300% of people that wanted to put the metal shoes on and stand on the rock and do it over and over again, and really get it, get the technique and the concept well enough that they could share it with another person who could get it, so that it really, like, I think Deanna is really accurate in that it has to maintain its structure for it to remain ATS. And if it gets diluted and pulled apart and just pieces of it are used and pieces of it aren't used, we sort of lose the game because it's not the same thing anymore. It's just kind of like what I see with the costume, I really feel like that by taking the headdress off and changing the costume, it really sort of diluted a little bit of the really super successful original ATS. But again, like, I was not in favor of taking the headdress off, even though, I did because everybody else did. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. But, I mean, I'm not going to be the only one in a headdress if nobody else is going to be wearing it, right? But what's the boundary of evolution? That's like a really good question, because in the beginning, when people started to sprout up doing sort of, their versions of ATS, if I had said, you can't do that, this is my thing and you can't do it, and I'm going to take you to court, or I'm going to badmouth you or whatever, then we would not be sitting here right now, right? If I had said, no, you can't, I probably wouldn't be teaching anymore, right? Because the 5 people that were taking my class would then be gone, right? So I had to say, okay, let's just see what happens, and things sprouted up, and then eventually better teaching happened. Eventually I got out there, the 20% got it, and then more, informative teaching happened, better dancers evolved, and sort of similar to when I don't know who it was that decided that we could perform without headdresses. I was appalled, but I thought, well, what am I going to do? Say no? Because if I do say no, then these dancers are going to leave and go create ATS without a headdress. It's going to be a different thing. So I thought, okay, if this is a necessary thing, and it was like in traveling, I was traveling internationally so much at that point that not taking a headdress was really welcome because of that whole deadline, get into teach all day and then put on a full headdress and be ready for a show deadline. That was a lot of work, So I did see the merit of lightening up on the headdress. But, so those are just a couple of instances where, the evolution presented itself, and I felt like, well, if I stop it in its tracks, am I going to stop the dance in its tracks? And I didn't want to do that, So I think within reason, I'm willing to see evolution of things. Kind of like Marta's belts that she's making out of the recycled leather and vegan leather with all her door buckle things on it, and she made that loop for the skirt. I'm like, that's brilliant. That's fantastic. Like, that's an evolution that's really good. That's going to contribute to people wearing full skirts. You know what I mean? But, some other evolution that's going to say, let's get rid of the choli and just wear pasties, and I'm like, no, I don't think that's going to contribute to the evolution of the dance, So I just think like sort of watching those things happen. Just to sort of loop back to the garment design thing, I have about another year of school to complete. But in the meantime, I'm working on it now, but I'm sort of also doing schoolwork. But what I want to do when I get out of school is go back into designing for dance costuming for the ATS dancer, because I realize that I've made you guys wear the same costume for 35 years. And maybe you want a little something extra or something new. So I realize that I'm in control of saying yes or no to the costuming pieces. So I want to create a little bit of variety for us, and I have some ideas. So stay tuned. I'm not going to stray very far from the uniform that's so beautiful on everybody, but I am going to create a little more variety for us. I might say that. So, it's that sort of like what evolution is evolution, and what is departing from the core values. Anybody else? 10 minutes. Yes, ma'am. My first tattoo? Oh, sure. The first tattoo that I got on my back is the phoenix bird that's holding the crystal. And there must have been something in the air with the modern primitives happening in the Bay Area, because I don't remember thinking I want to become like a tattooed person. It was not popular when I first got tattooed. There were people with tattoos, but it just wasn't like part of the modern culture. So, but something, you know what I think it was? Before, when was it? I started working out, lifting weights at the gym while I was still in Masha's dance troupe. And then after that disbanded, I continued working out with weights, and I got into Olympic weightlifting, which is one of the most phenomenal not exercise, but athletic, aerodynamic feats known to man. Like when I watch the weightlifting on TV, I'm like, pick it up. And Olympic lifting is not is not powerlifting, is not bodybuilding. Olympic lifting is what they do on the Olympics when they snap the thing overhead. I mean, oh man, like I could do it in my sleep. I love it. So my mom was a little concerned about this, and she said, well, I'm okay with the weightlifting, but just don't get any tattoos. And I was like, tattoos? You know, that was right when Ronald Privitus was, peeking around the corner. And it just, it became interesting. And I had this book that my mom gave me, ironically. It's a children's book called The Weaving of a Dream. And the illustrations are beautiful. It's a story of a Chinese woman who, I don't know, something happens, and there's this phoenix bird holding a crystal in its hands, and it's kind of like the moniker of the book. And like when I saw that, I was like, that's the tattoo that I want. So I took it to Vivienne Lazanga, is a female tattoo artist who was working in San Francisco at the time. So I took it to her and I told her what I wanted, and she originally just drew a phoenix bird, like a traditional tattoo phoenix bird, and I was like, no, I want the same thing that's in the book. So she did the same thing that was in the book. And originally I wanted it down my back, and she was like, if this is your first tattoo, you don't want it on top of your spine. And I was like, okay. So she put it to the side, and let me tell you, she's right about that. But that was my first tattoo. And ironically, I tried to tell my mom about it without having to tell her, because that's always a healthy dynamic in a family. And so I kept trying to turn in a way that she would see it, you know what I mean? And she's just not a curious, she's not, she doesn't analyze people, you know what I mean? So she wasn't looking that closely. And we even went on we went to the Zen Center for an overnight retreat, my mom and I together. And we slept in the same bed, and I thought, surely now she'll see it, right? So I kind of kept trying to arrange my bedclothes so that she would see it, and she just never saw the damn thing. And I'm like, eh. So down the road, I then got a few other tattoos, and I have a band of flowers around my leg, and in the center is a little old school bird with holding a heart with a banner that says "Mom," right? So this was several years later, and she came over to my house, and I said, happy birthday. And she was like, oh, thank you. And I said, I got you a present. And she's like, oh, you didn't need to. And I said, look. And I showed her my leg, and she was like, oh, it says Mom. I was like, yeah, it's for you, because she was a bird watcher and everything. And then I was like, and look, there's other tattoos too. And she was just like, oh my. So, yeah. But then the other one, the down the road one was, where did I tell that thing about the tattoo magazine? Did I just tell that story? Did I ever tell you the story about what my dad said? No? When was that? I don't know. I've been blabbing so much, I'm not sure. But so many, many years down the road, my dance troupe ended up in one of the Skin and Ink tattoo magazines. And another thing that I'm quite proud of, being in Skin and Ink. And my dad and I had a really rough time, and eventually we patched it up, which is kind of amazing considering how angry we were at each other, but we actually figured out our stuff. And by the time that patching up happened, he was pretty elderly, and he became very gentle in his old age, which was really, really endearing to see. This really this kind of dad turn into this kind of dad, and it was really beautiful. And he requested that I bring him newspapers from anywhere that I traveled. So even if it wasn't in English, he just wanted a newspaper so he could, feel like he went somewhere. So at one point I thought, I got nothing to lose, and I brought him the tattoo magazine. And I said, Dad, I wanted to show you this magazine. And he said, oh. And he, very methodical, turned every page without saying anything. Looking at every single page, got to the end, closed the magazine, and looked at me and he said, well, all of the tattoos in this magazine are very nice, but yours are clearly the best. And I was like, aw. Like, that was not old dad, you know what I mean? That was definitely new dad that said that, because old dad would have just been like, you realize they don't come off. You know what I mean? So that was really sweet. So, anybody else? We're done. We did it. Yay. Yay. Now, everybody that's in this room are now disciples of this lecture. And should you go out and change the information, I will know, okay? So if you're going to repeat any of this, it needs to be accurate. And let's not have the alternate history of ATS show up anywhere else. Okay? So run off and have a lovely evening. And I'll see you all in class tomorrow. Right? We have Nubian tomorrow. Tomorrow morning we have Nubian. If you can count to 4, you can come to class.